Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the Q&A of Take Two. I hope everyone enjoyed the film as much as I did. Please remember that it's available for an audience award, so don't forget to rate it and the other films you watch as soon as you're finished. I want to start off by thanking the sponsors of this film, Summerwood Winery and Inn, and Films for Good through Bob and Christine Williams. I also want to thank our major sponsors, BHE Renewables, KSBY, and American General Media. I'm truly excited to have with us today the film's director, Curtis Yap, and composer Brooke Monroe with us. Thanks much, you guys, for doing this Q&A with our audience. We'll try to keep our conversation to about 10 minutes. And with that, I'll just start off by saying, where are each of you located?
I am in Santa Maria right now.
Okay. And Brooke?
And I'm in Orchid, so pretty close
Oh,
to
you're pretty
Curtis.
close. All right. So just out of curiosity, you all have worked together before on films?
Yeah, I think I had gotten Brooke on Liftoff, another film I shot for the SLO Film Fest before this. And kind of when I was finishing a rough cut, I brought Brooke in because I listened to his score and he was pretty good, and I wanted him involved. It was hard to find really good talent locally.
I can imagine. Well, tell me why you tackled this particular project. Are you personally involved with the Lompoc Theater's restoration?
No, actually, I think it was 3 years ago when I was still in school. I just saw an Instagram post about the Lompoc Theater project, and they were fundraising um, to get some new seats installed. So I just reached out on their Instagram page saying I'd like to make a documentary about them restoring the theater. And Mark Carrier, who was the former board president, said, "Oh, it's going to take like 10 or 12 years." And I was like, I don't know if I want to stay here for 10 or 12 years. I'll probably just do it for like a month or something. And it wasn't until last year that we actually started the interviews, and then I did the B-roll afterwards. So.
Okay. What were your original goals with the film, and how do you feel about it now that it's complete?
I think my first goal was to kind of get back into documentary filmmaking. I kind of dabbled with it in film school before, but hadn't really made a documentary on my own. I hadn't directed anything in a while that I was kind of proud of, and I just loved their like their message. They wanted to build a theater that kind of brought the community together, and I wanted to support that and hope that making a film we could get a lot of people to contribute and participate in that.
How about you, Brooke?
Um, for me to be involved with something like this, I've not spent much time in Lompoc, so I don't have the history of going to the theater, and probably, I don't think the theater's ever really been running while I've been old enough to participate. But the theater going experience for me has always been such an essential part of my life. And when Curtis brought me aboard, I felt it was important that, musically we could create something that would hopefully give people a sense of place, and kind of take them back a little bit. And so, through our conversations, and they invited me to go inside the theater as it's still being restored, it was really kind of awe-inspiring to see the progress they had already made. And I got to see a cut, an earlier cut of the film while Curtis was still filming. And I felt, this kind of sense of magic that I think that theater possesses, or at least did possess, and the potential for many new generations to experience it again. And so I'm hoping that that's reflected by, the storytelling component of the documentary.
Great. So can you share your thought process, Curtis, in framing the documentary? How do you go about sharing the theater's rich history and get across the message that you wanted to do that?
Well, like Brooke said, it was kind of about capturing that magic of like going to the theater. So I kind of just drew on my childhood from when my brother took me to see Star Wars when I was in first grade or something like that. And he bought me this little Millennium Falcon afterwards, and it was such a indelible stamp on my memory. I always kind of kept that memory with me. So when I first had ideas for the movie, I thought it'd be great to kind of bookend it with somebody just going back into the theater and watching a film there. And I wanted to kind of capture that spirit of movie making while also showing people's memories of the movies at the same time.
Mhm.
You know?
So that's why you found the individual to get a ticket and go sit in the theater?
Yeah, well, that's actually Jay Salzberg. I think he's on the board now. He was their handyman. But he was the one like fixing everything in the theater. And originally it was supposed to be everybody on the board coming into the theater and watching a movie, but because of COVID and some other scheduling conflicts, we just had to have Jay in there instead.
I got it. So when did you film this documentary?
In February, yeah,
A year
February
ago.
last year,
So
2020.
just as COVID was hitting and
Yeah,
locking everything down. Okay. And how do you feel about the film? You feel that the approach you did by showing the person coming into the theater and by interviewing the man who started it all, who I think now is the nonprofit's executive director.
Yeah,
um,
Mark Harrier. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Um,
yeah. I like that the way I approached it because I thought of it as like a narrative instead of just an accounting of events, which I feel like a lot of documentaries are.
mhm.
So I thought that if I wrote it like it was a story, with a beginning and exposition and then like a climax kind of near the end of the film when Mark's talking about all the things the theater could be, I think that that's what made it a larger than life documentary in my eyes.
Mhm. And Brooke, as we mentioned, you wrote an all orchestral score.
Mhm.
And as I understand it, it was inspired by the works of John Williams, Aaron Copland, and Alan Silvestri. Can you talk a little bit about that and how do you go about the process of creating a score and making one that, helps tell the rich story of this documentary, of
Yeah,
this theater?
absolutely. Well, I think it's all rooted in ultimately what the mission of of what this documentary is trying to do. And I think it's trying to pull at a particular sense of nostalgia, at a certain sense of joy and that kind of childlike wonder. And there's those composers that I listed in particular, John Williams, who's so intrinsically tied into my own childhood with, again, like Curtis Star Wars, is the reason why I do what I do and why I score films, is because that form of storytelling is so captivating to me that once we had this conversation of what we were trying to accomplish, ultimately at that point was then, for this particular score, I think I just went to the piano and started fleshing out more or less a melody, a reoccurring motif that would be thematic and could be um utilized in different ways throughout the film. The hard thing with short films and in particular with documentaries is that music is never really central, but if you take it out, you realize that there's something missing. And so while I was fully aware that a lot of the music and a lot of the orchestration and the real nitty gritty stuff probably wouldn't be heard, it was important for me that at least it was felt by the audience. And so once I figured out more or less on the piano what parts would work in what sections of the film, then we went and orchestrated it accordingly.
Mhm. So what were some of the challenges that you both faced in making this film?
Not a whole ton other than kind of changing the opening. There's actually another film screening at the SLO Film Festival, the Firestorm 77 Honda Canyon Fire, and one of the directors, Chris Height, was actually my film professor, and I was going to have him do the beginning sequence where he's threading the projector for the
Mhm.
movie that Jay's going to watch, and since he couldn't do it, I wasn't able to shoot him. I got my dad to do it. Well, it's actually my dad in the
Your dad
beginning.
in the credits, yeah. I
Yeah.
saw your dad.
Yeah, I bought a projector. I had some 16 millimeter film laying around, and my dad used to do mechanics, so he's good with his hands and anything mechanical. So I just asked him to learn how to thread a projector, and I shot him doing that.
Cool.
For me, I think the biggest challenge, and for most composers, I think they would probably agree, it's you never have enough time to write. I rarely write purely orchestral scores. A lot of times they're orchestral in nature, but then there'll be some synthesizers or sounds that I've created to incorporate in there. But because I wanted this to be a what you would call a Hollywood classical score, it requires a lot of understanding of the mechanics of how certain instrument groups work well together in support of, say, your main melody lines. And just that alone starts stacking, it starts chipping away, I think, time wise. And so I think we knew fundamentally early on what we were trying to accomplish. It was just more of, we had a deadline as to how much time we needed before we had to start submitting to the festivals. And so for me, it was just a lot of, especially towards the end, a lot of late nights. Just, we may not be hearing the oboe or the clarinet, but they're in there. And if you take them out again, you notice something's missing. So that's kind of
So did you line up
challenge.
people to play those instruments, or is this synthesized?
This is synthesized. As much as I would have liked to bring in, an entire orchestra, it's written as such, to bring in a 90-piece orchestra. Unfortunately, that wasn't part of the budget. So nowadays, one great aspect for us composers is, in situations like this, the samples that are, what you're hearing are actual players playing. They're just samples that I've then played on my keyboard, and they're highly articulated. They're recorded by some of the best players in the world in some of the best rooms in the world. And it's just up to me to try to replicate a performance that they would make.
It's a fascinating process. I'm sure many people would love to watch you, both of you, pull it off. So you started the filmmaking in February, and you had to wrap up what, by September? Am I
Yeah,
guessing?
yeah, I think that's when we started submitting to festivals around that time.
Mhm. And what did you learn from making this movie?
Oh, I learned that you can never plan enough. There's always something that's gonna kind of come up, and like a pandemic or something, and that'll kind of put the brakes on your film. And another thing is kind of just trusting in other people. A lot of the times when I worked on film sets before, I kind of just did everything myself. So it was kind of a relief to trust somebody else to have a big role in kind of shaping the film. That's why I'm happy I found Brooke to do the score.
Yeah, well, that's fabulous. What about you, Brooke? Is there anything you think is noteworthy about what you learned from making this movie?
For me, it's trusting my gut, trusting the process, and trusting, like Curtis says, the director, who really is steering the ship. And Curtis did a great job of articulating what he was looking for. I had to just trust myself that I could get it done, in a way, like I said, this being an all orchestral score, is not done a whole lot these days, as films are being produced, and trying to keep budgets tight, and making that sound is very time consuming. And for me, I'm not the quickest at writing these kinds of scores. So it was just trusting that I could do it, trusting the process, and trusting my instinct. And I think I did that. And I thank Curtis for believing that I could do that, so I could do it for him.
Well, I think that's great. So, is there anything you'd like to share that we haven't discussed about this project?
No, I just hope people enjoyed it, and I hope you can just contribute a little bit to the theater. It's going to be a great end product. I think it'll really bring the community together.
Mhm.
I think for me, you know, this is going to be the first year where many of us have not been to a movie theater in, you know, a whole calendar year.
Mhm.
And I think we're feeling the effects of it. I mean, we're doing a film festival. We're talking about this stuff not at the end of the film, you know, standing up at the front of the screen, but rather, you know, doing this on here. And uh, I think it's so vital that theaters of all sorts, whether they're corporately owned or privately owned, um, they possess so much cultural infrastructure for us. And while we can tell these stories on and show them on the small screen, there's a certain magic that we lose when we don't get to sit there in front of this big screen with all these people. And one day, you know, we're all going to be ready, and it'll be safe for us all to sit in that theater again. And you know, the fact that Lompoc has in the past had this beautiful theater that people could go to. I think this will be a great haven for inspiration for younger generations as well as older generations to hopefully be inspired to create and to add to the fabric of storytelling and filmmaking, hopefully on the Central Coast in the future.
Yeah, it's well said, both of you. And as I understand it, there is certainly a website for those who are interested in learning even more about this project. If you Google Lompoc Theater Project, you'll find a number of things and sort of a timeline of the groups, the nonprofits' hopes for getting this theater refurbished and back open. But again, I want to thank both of you, Curtis and Brooke, for taking the time with us today to share your insight into the making of this wonderful film. I also want to thank our sponsors, Summerwood Winery and Films for Good through Bob and Christine Williams, and the film festival's major sponsors, BHE Renewables, KSBY, and American General Media. And last, our audience, don't forget to vote for this film and others. And with that, I want to say thank you again very much and have a great day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Take care.